We encourage questions from our participants. You can put your questions in the chat box. And here are the financial and non-financial disclosures. I am the host of Keys for SLPs podcast and receive compensation from SpeechTherapyPD. Nina Reeves is the co-owner of Stuttering Therapy Resources. She receives an honorarium from SpeechTherapyPD for her podcast appearance. She is a volunteer consultant and is on the advisory board for the National Stuttering Association. J. Scott Yaruss is a salaried professor at Michigan State University. He receives royalties from Stuttering Therapy Resources. He receives an honorarium from SpeechTherapyPD for his podcast appearance. And our learning objectives for today are: 1, explain how stuttering treatment and evaluation have evolved. 2, explain key research that has impacted the treatment and assessment of stuttering in the last 50 years. 3, describe suggestions for the future direction of research and treatment in stuttering. And now let's meet our first two legends, Nina Reeves and J. Scott Yaruss, for our inaugural Learning from Legends podcast. Nina Reeves, MS, CCC-SLP, BCS-F, ASHA Fellow, is a board-certified specialist in fluency disorders. Nina is a staff fluency specialist for Frisco ISD and a fluency specialist consultant for San Diego Unified Schools. Nina is a nationally recognized workshop presenter in the area of fluency disorders and is an author of clinically based materials. She is the co-owner of Stuttering Therapy Resources. Nina is a recipient of numerous awards, including the ASHA Foundation Van Hatten Award for Outstanding Contributions to Public Schools, and was awarded the 2019 Certificate of Recognition for Special Contributions to Preschool through Grade 12 Education Settings. Welcome, Nina. And J. Scott Yaruss, PhD, is a professor of communicative sciences and disorders at Michigan State University, and he is president of Stuttering Therapy Resources. He has published more than 100 peer-reviewed manuscripts and more than 250 other works, including the overall assessment of the speaker's experience of stuttering and several clinical guides. He has given more than 700 presentations around the world about stuttering, and he'll be giving one in a few hours in Denmark, I hear, and stuttering therapy, as well as 200 additional scientific presentations. Scott has served on the board of directors of the National Stuttering Association and has been recognized with the NSA's Speech-Language Pathologist of the Year and Hall of Fame awards. Welcome, Scott and Nina.
Thanks for having us, Mary Beth.
Well, we are so excited to get to know you a little better and learn about your career, research, contributions to the field, and perspectives on the future. So let's jump in. So, not to put you on the spot, but just for fun, can you tell us something about yourself that people may not know?
I'm going to let Nina go first on that because there's really not that much fun about me, and people know everything about me. So,
hey, there's always something fun about you, but we'll let Nina go first.
You should ask it about each other. We could have a little fun with that, but maybe not. So,
no.
We do a lot of everything's stuttering in our world. So we can be boring that way, but I was trying to come up with something. I think some people know it, some people don't, but I'm a big Italophile. I love all things Italian. I have family in Italy, and so I'm an Italian coffee snob, and I speak a little bit of Italian, enough to get me by. And it's one of the most wonderful countries. So if I could live there, I would, but I have a lot of work to do here, so I'm staying.
Ah, well, that is very cool to know. I actually just returned from Italy. I did not know this. My daughter is studying in Florence for the semester, and so my husband and I went to visit, and I also fell in love with Italy. I'm not Italian, but I sure do love it and can't wait to go back. Okay, so Scott, can you top that?
No, I can't top that. I'm frankly afraid of Italy because the one time I tried to drive there, I literally got beat up. physically accosted. So I'm terrified of Italy. However, everything that Nina said applies to me for Mexico. That's my happy place. That's where I go to relax. Not coffee, but chocolate. And so, yes, that's good. Now, one thing that, though, that people probably don't know about me is that I've got more hobbies than I can count. I don't ever get to engage in them as much as I'd like to, but I have so many things that I love to do: play the guitar, scuba dive, learn Spanish. And so people often think of me, if they even know me, as related to work. And that's great because that's how I want them to know me. But I do a lot of other things when I have time.
Oh, well, that is great to hear. Wow. Any favorite place to go in Mexico?
Mexico.
Just Mexico.
I've been 30 times. And like Nina said, if I could live there, I would. Yeah, so that's where I go to unplug and relax and to recharge a little bit. So
Oh, that's great. And I love all the hobbies. It's so fun to add more. Um, I've just recently added another one. And just as we say at Speech Therapy PD, keep learning, right?
yep.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing that. So let's go back and tell us what initially led you to the field of communicative science and disorders.
We both have some cool stories there, but I was born with a cleft palate. And so I had speech therapy from the time I was maybe 3 years old all the way through eighth grade. And in the little cornfields of Illinois, where I grew up in the small town, we had one speech therapist for all, she stayed the whole time, and her name was Miss Prince, and she was my hero. And so, as my mom said, she fixed my mouth so well, I haven't stopped talking since. But yeah, Miss Prince was the reason. I don't think I ever wanted to be anything else. Like from the age of 9, it was speech pathology.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, I'm glad she served you so well.
And I cannot top that because that's inspiring and personal. My story is more about dumb luck, truly. I came to the field from linguistics and psychology because I love the study of language and I love the study of people. I'm actually, Nina will tell you, I'm afraid of people in person, but I love to study people. I'm totally good with that. And when I was coming to graduate, I asked my advisors about a field where I could study language and people. But the college that I went to was fairly pure in its scientific endeavor, and they didn't know of anything. They said, no, you can be a linguist or you can be a psychologist, an experimental psychologist. And one of my primary advisors just happened to have a wife who was a speech language pathologist. And he said, I think my wife does something with kids. Go talk to her. And so I did. He had no idea. This is a big name. Everybody has studied this individual's work. And I went and I volunteered with his wife at her Center for Children with Autism, which again terrified me. And because I just wasn't prepared, I knew nothing. But that got me into the field. That's how I found out about it. And I applied to a bunch of schools. Back then, you had to go to the library and get the Barron's book that you could look through to learn about the schools. There was no US
Yes.
News and World Report. There was no online review. And I picked 6 schools. I don't even remember how I picked them, but I picked 6 schools and I applied to them. And one of the applications asked, is there any specific area of the field you're interested in? And there wasn't because I knew nothing about the field. But I thought it might help me get in. So I put stuttering.
Oh my. I
Dumb luck,
bet.
truly. I put stuttering because that'd be interesting, right? It is, sure. And I got in, and then I know I wanted to do research. I didn't know on what, so I emailed the various No, I didn't email. I wrote to the various programs, said, "Is it possible for a master's student to do research?" And one of the 6 programs, Dr. Ed Contour, sent me a box, a literal box of papers that students had been involved in. So that's how I decided to go there and to study stuttering. So it was dumb luck, truly dumb luck.
Wow, that's amazing. And what school was that?
Syracuse University. And in
Syracuse.
fact, just a couple of hours ago, we celebrated a bunch of us who were Ed's graduates, Dr. Ed Contours. We celebrated his 80th birthday with a little bit of a tribute. All of us talking about our experiences in coming to study with him at Syracuse or at Vanderbilt thereafter.
Wow, wow. Well, that is a great story. It's so interesting, when you're young and making these decisions, you never know how one little decision or one checking one box is going to affect the rest of your life.
I was very fortunate. I often say if my kids put as little thought into their future as I did, we'd be having a serious conversation. But
Yeah.
it was just luck. I mean, now, in fairness, my grandfather stuttered, and so I was aware of stuttering. But it wasn't like, some inspiring story where I said, I'm going to figure out this thing that plagued my grandfather. It was nothing like that. It was just, oh, I know the word stuttering. I'm going to write that in. Maybe it'll help me get into grad school.
Yeah,
It was a
that
different
that is
time.
so interesting. Just out of curiosity, did your grandfather at time or any time in his life, did he have therapy?
He did. He did. In fact, my serious claim to fame in the field is that my grandfather was treated by Lee Edward Travis. Many folks on the call would know the name. The so-called grandfather of the field of speech language pathology here in the United States treated my grandfather poorly, it turned out, because, it was the 1930s and they didn't know anything. They did the best they could. But interestingly, my grandfather and I never really talked about his stuttering. It was a fact. It was just there. By the time I knew him, it was no longer a factor in his life. But when he was a younger man, it was a significant factor. For World War II, he was classified 4F, unfit to serve. He worked as a riveter when he was drafted in World War II. And anytime I see Rosie the Riveter saying, "Yes, we can," I picture my grandfather.
Oh, that's
Because
great.
that's what he did. But no, we never talked about it until long after I had my PhD. I was running the stuttering program at Northwestern University. And one night we went to the one of those Italian restaurants where they put the Chianti on the table and they don't measure because you're gonna drink it anyway. Well, by the second bottle, he started telling me a little bit of experiences with stuttering. And indeed, it was devastating for him when he was young. But by the time I knew him, he stuttered and did everything. He would say he used to stutter, right? That's how he would talk about it. But he would say,
Interesting.
I, I used to stutter, right? And I wasn't about to say, Gramps, actually, that was a part word repetition, right? He was the perfect embodiment of the message that we try to get out today, is that people can stutter and do anything in their lives. He didn't come to that realization until he was 42 years old. But if we can help kids come to that realization at 4 years old, we could make a real difference in people's lives. So that's jumping ahead a bit, but that's part of why Nina and I do what we do.
Absolutely. Well, that's so interesting. I know we want to jump into some other things, but was there a pivotal moment for him?
There was, in fact, when he was 42, he had to give a eulogy for his best friend. And everybody, now, of course, I wasn't there. I'm hearing this from my grandmother and from him, many years later. But everybody said, no, no, everybody said, Mel can't do it. Mel, he can't talk. He can't get up in front of the group because of stuttering. But it was important enough for him to do it, and so he did. Of course, I'm told he stuttered during it, but he learned from that he could say what he wanted to say regardless of whether or not he stuttered. And that sort of opened a door for him. I'm sure there were other things as well, not just giving the eulogy, maybe, recognizing that one of his best friends was gone at such a young age. It was a difficult
Hmm.
time.
Hmm.
But that was a turning point for him. He was a door-to-door salesman, like in the old days where people used to knock on your door with their carpet and drapery samples. He did that as a stutterer. And, so he overcame that fear. And what I remember most about my grandfather is that he was always talking. Like Nina was saying, we would go out to dinner. My grandmother and I'd be in the car half an hour waiting for him. He's still talking to the people that he met there at the restaurant, talking to everybody and not being held back. My grandmother said he had 42 years of not talking to make up for. So
Oh, right. Well, what a great example for us all.
exactly.
Um, okay. So eventually we learned a little bit about what led you to the field of stuttering within SLP. Nina, how about you? What led you to the field of stuttering within speech language pathology?
Well, as you can imagine, I was going to work with children with cleft palate. I was going to be at Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's in the, orofacial anomalies section. And I was going to, help all those kids that were just like me until I got out of grad school, got my first job in the public schools of the then bean fields of Illinois. Because of crop rotation, they were beans that year. And I met my first kid who stuttered. And I had really good training. I was trained by a Van Riperen trained guy who stutters. And so I had 2 classes in stuttering, 25 hours and 5 minutes of practicum, which I know many people don't get now. And I came in, going to set the world on fire. And honestly, I had no idea what I was doing with this young man. And we were doing everything I was taught, but he was struggling. And I just thought, this isn't okay with me. I cannot go years with this young man in this little school and fail him. So I jumped into everything I could find, intensive, professional development, read all of the Stuttering Foundation books, just did everything I could to learn more about stuttering. And, that's the history. I mean, it was the black hole that sucked me in, and I've never worked with a kid with cleft palate.
Wow. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so you started in the beet fields of Illinois, and then where else has your career taken you?
Just basically Illinois and Texas, because I've been in the public schools the whole time. It's only been a couple of years that I've been out of the public schools, and it's just been my joy to work where the kids are, right? The children that are never going to see the inside of a private practice or a clinic. This is where they all are, and it was apparent to me early that my colleagues felt the same way I did early on. Very not comfortable with stuttering, not sure what they were supposed to be doing. Most of them had been trained differently than me. They were really all everyone around me was doing just fluency only. I mean, there were not even a lot of Van Riper things going on, and almost no thoughts and feelings going on. It was just tool, fluency, fluency, fluency. And nobody felt good about it, but it was all they were ever trained in. And so it just took off from there. Once people know you have a special interest in stuttering, they come out of the woodwork to ask you questions, to try to feel more comfortable. And the reason I moved to Texas is because I volunteer with the National Stuttering Association, and through that organization, I met my now husband, and he's a Texan, and he's a guy who stutters. He was the chairman of the board at the time, and he is a Texan, and so you move to Texas because they don't move to Illinois.
No. Oh, that's great. And then, let's take a little diversion here. So as part of the Learning from Legends series, we are interviewing ASHA fellows in honor of the 100th anniversary, as we said. Can you tell us a little bit about how you become nominated to become an ASHA fellow, especially as someone who worked in the school system?
Well, I'm going to let Scott answer how you get nominated, because he nominated me for fellow. And I think he has written for so many people the nomination packets, and gotten those together. I think he would be the one to speak to that. I'll just say that I was shocked. I know there aren't very many people from the public schools that ever get fellow. And so I was honored to, be one of the standard bearers of that. And I hope I see a lot more of that in the future.
Yeah, indeed. Now, I'll tell you that it was a relatively easy case to make for me to lead the nomination to get Nina recognized as an ASHA Fellow because of the work that she's done. But it is a very extensive process. It takes three sponsors, 2 of whom are already ASHA Fellows. So you're going to be nominated by people who have already received that recognition. And you have to have two people who haven't worked directly with the person. So Nina and I have worked together for decades. So I could be the lead sponsor, but I needed two other sponsors who hadn't worked directly with her to be able to review her work and discuss the impact. And the way it works is that there are different areas that you can highlight a person's expertise and impact in. And if I recall correctly, there are several different areas. I think it's 6 areas of impact, and you choose 3 of them. So one of them is clinical service, one of them is clinical education, one is research contributions, one is administrative service, one is service to ASHA, and one is service to state associations. And so you build a case around the person's contributions in those areas that you've selected, and you pick the areas that are going to be for that person, and everybody writes around those areas. The challenge is, for example, for Nina, finding we have clinical service clearly, clinical education clearly, contributing to research clearly, and then service in the schools and service to ASHA, service to the profession, with being on the board of directors for the National Stuttering Association, an NSA Hall of Fame inductee, serving on ASHA committees and such. So you build a case around those things, and then it's extremely competitive. I am very pleased to say that our nomination of Nina was successful in the first round. They aren't always. And so if you don't get through in the first round, you go back and do it again. But we didn't have to do that this time. So.
And is a round a year? Like, is there one round per year?
One round per year. They're due, a week from today. Are when the next submissions are due. And then you find out before the convention, and the honorees are honored at the convention.
Okay, very exciting. Well, I'm sure, I bet you we have someone on this call who may be able to be nominated down the line. Wouldn't that be fun? Let's just like plant a seed for some people. And then, Nina, you also wanted to share one of the awards you received is specific for speech language pathologists who have served in the schools. And since so many people here are school-based SLPs, can you share a little bit about that?
Yes, in fact, it's the Van Hatten Award from the ASHA Foundation. Also, the newer award that ASHA gives out now, the Certificate of Achievement in the public schools. But those are areas that I think people don't know are there, that there are a lot of really great public school SLPs that need to be aware that there are some ways to get honored from ASHA, not enough, but some. And in the public schools, sorry, that's it. And I think it's incumbent upon school-based SLPs to nominate each other and to get into that. Yes, it can feel overwhelming, but once you get into it, you can get the packets ready and do it, because we have to be our own, advocates in this profession to say it's not always elsewhere that the good work gets done. There are really some innovative things going on in the public schools, and they need to be honored.
Absolutely. And we need to advocate, support, and lift each other up. So thank you for sharing that. All right, well, let's dive into stuttering. Actually, before we do that, you said you've been working together for many years. How did that working relationship evolve?
Nina wanted to write a book. Yeah, well, we met each other at, okay, so I'll tell you the very first time we met. This is a mistake that I made. We were at ISHA, Illinois Speech and Hearing Association, and I didn't know Nina, but Nina was beginning to specialize in stuttering, or had already been specializing in stuttering. I was new. I worked at Northwestern University at the time. And so for the Illinois Speech and Hearing Association, we did stuttering panels. Bob Queasel, dear friend of ours who just passed away last month, and I used to plan the tracks for the ISHA convention. And So we were tap dancing. We had to fill some space because our invited speaker was late. And so we invited all the people interested in stuttering up on the stage to try to fill some space. And so I invited up Bob and I invited up some other people that, we knew, but I didn't know Nina then. And so I didn't invite her up on the stage. And fortunately, she engaged in some very appropriate self-advocacy and said, me too. And I still feel bad. I'm sorry, Nina, that I did that. But then afterwards, we talked because I wanted to make up for it, and that's how we got to know each other. And then years later, it was years later because I was at Pitt at the time, I think. Nina contacted me about, hey, you know what? We need to write an activity book to help school-based clinicians know what to do in stuttering therapy. That was 25 years ago. We published that book last year. Along the way, we published several other books.
Okay,
But it took us
okay.
a little bit to get to the activity book. That was the beginning of our partnership.
Wow, wow, that's excellent. Well, and then what a story for advocating for self-advocacy. And had you skipped her, there might not have been a reason. If you had not skipped her, there might not have been a reason to catch up afterwards. So lemons into lemonade for sure on that one. That's
That,
great. All right. So that book was published and is available for anyone, but especially focused on school-based SLPs.
the activity guide that we just published is a supplement to our initial book that is school age stuttering therapy from beginning to end. Okay.
Okay.
And it has some activities in it for sure. But we have so many activities between the two of us doing this for years. Okay. I've been doing it for 3 years now, since I got my CCC, February 1 of 1992. I think that's right. But we have literally binders of activities. And so we pulled together activities that are specifically focused for this book on the early stages of therapy. What do you do on day one? What do you do when you've just inherited a kid and you don't know what they've been up to? Or when you've just done an evaluation, where do you start? Or a kid who's coming back to therapy after a long break. Or, you don't feel like things are going the way you want. How are you going to jumpstart and retrack your therapy? So this book is more than 50 activities for that stage of therapy. And it's the beginning of a series in which we're going to work our way through these binders of activities. We've mapped out 10 of them. Don't tell our spouses because I think it's more like 10. Okay. And we're just going to
You're
work our
never
way.
going to get to Italy or Mexico.
Yes, this has been a topic of discussion. But along the way, we wrote a couple of other books because we knew that we couldn't get to just the activities without the foundation. So we wrote the foundations first. The foundations are there now, and now we want to say, all right, once you understand what stuttering truly is, now activities will make more sense. Otherwise, if you just download a thing or you just find a thing on Instagram and you just do it and you don't see how it fits into the big picture, then it won't necessarily get in the direction that you're hoping that that therapy will get.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. So that's how you all met, and you both have been in the stuttering field. So how has the treatment and evaluation of stuttering evolved through your years? Or through the years in general? You can talk about, starting with your grandfather's therapy in the 30s if you want, however you want to approach it. And I know
Yes,
this
or
is
my
a big
husband.
question for a little hour podcast. I mean, we could probably have, a 10-hour webinar on this, but just in your opinion.
In fact, it's funny
Well,
because Nina was just saying this is where Lee really shines. He'll go all the way back to Aristotle and Demosthenes if you want. So that's
he is a stuttering history nerd, and we love him for that. Um, so I only have one thing to say about this. I'm older than Scott, so I've got probably a good 7 years before Scott came in, maybe more. Um, I I can tell you that just in the big picture, it's what I was talking about when I was talking about my fellow clinicians who were trained in only fluency. I think the biggest shift over the years has been the understanding that we are shifting away from a fluency focus We are now, really naming the terms of neurodiversity affirming therapy, which is something that many of us have been doing for 30 years. It just didn't have a name back then.
Mhm.
And it was client centered. It was, holistic. It was making sure that you had the whole child and the whole person involved in what you were assessing and what you were addressing in therapy. But that's the biggest shift for me in my career. Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I would like to say, because Nina is always more optimistic than I am, it is an aspirational shift that we are seeing. The pendulum has swung back and forth in the field. There have been times when stuttering was viewed um, through a more holistic lens, and there have been times when it's viewed through purely a speech lens. I do think we're making progress and encouraging people to remember that, as we like to say, stuttering is more than just stuttering, it's more than just speech, and that we have to address the entire condition. And I think what's really changed, that's a very positive step, in my opinion, is, as Nina's saying, this now listening to the speaker. Right. So, yes, we're going to treat more than just the stuttering. Well, what does that mean? It doesn't mean where other people identify that the speaker isn't participating. Let's ask the speaker what they want. And remarkably, so much of the literature in our field is based on the listener perspective. Whether a listener heard a stutter or saw a moment of tension or an eye blink or whatever. Oddly enough, there just hasn't been as much focus on asking the speaker what they experience. Now, this has been done and it's increasing. This work is now more and more making it to the frontline clinician, right? Where clinicians are now beginning to feel more comfortable asking, what are you seeking from your therapy? How did that moment feel for you? How do you feel about the direction that we're going in therapy? Do you like what we're up to? Rather than, by the next session, I want you to do 82 practices of this particular technique, because when you do that, other people feel more comfortable.
Mhm.
And we didn't have the strength of the neurodiversity perspective on stuttering to be able to just come right out and say, no, you're asking them to do that for your comfort, not for theirs. And now we have that. So we have our autistic friends to thank for leading this, because they have really taken the brunt of the initial impetus for making this argument. Stuttering's a little bit behind, but we, I believe, are catching up on advocating for the voice of people who stutter, not just in defining stuttering, but defining therapy. So that's a good thing. And I still think it's aspirational. Some days I think we're getting there, and then I look at Instagram and then I cry.
What is it on Instagram that you're seeing that causes those tears?
Well, I won't name names.
No, no,
Um,
no, no, not to name names, but what is it that you're
I
seeing?
have named names, but no, oversimplification. And I understand Instagram is a place for simplification. So it's not, Nina will listen to me rail against social media in general. You might imagine I don't have any social media accounts because I'm not allowed to. Nina and my wife, Virginia, did an intervention some years ago, took them all away because I'm the wrong personality for that. I'm that guy that's like, "Rah," in the middle of the night. But an oversimplification, be a boss at stuttering therapy, just these simple 32 tricks and you'll be the best ever. That's not helpful, in my opinion, because stuttering is complex. And we don't want to deny that complexity. What I'd rather say, and this has been the mission that Nina brought to this partnership, clinicians are up to the task. We don't have to dumb stuttering down for them. They can handle it. They can be. What we want to write is the Thinking Clinician's Guide to Stuttering Therapy, and they can do it. We don't have to oversimplify it. But when I look at, you just need this list and just tick this box, bada boom, it just makes me sad because it demeans clinicians and it demeans people who stutter, in my opinion. Now, these accounts are hugely popular, and so it's clearly attracting an audience. I would
Mhm.
just rather see clinicians feel empowered enough to know that they can handle this. Yeah, stuttering's complicated, but who would ever dream of saying that aphasia is easy or apraxia is easy or autism is easy? The things we do in our field, they're complicated. And I just listed the A's. I mean, there's more.
Right.
And we're up to the task. And that's the message that we want to give clinicians. You can do this because it is our firm belief that every speech language pathologist can be an outstanding stuttering therapist.
But Scott's not passionate about that. He's not at all.
Well, you are inspiring, and thank you so much for all the resources, including one. I think the last time that we talked, we were doing on Speech Therapy PD, we were doing a stuttering series that I was co-hosting, and you were creating the OASES or OASES.
I just say Oasis. Yeah, exactly.
Oasis.
Yeah.
It's Oasis. Okay.
Yep.
All right, but that has now been published.
Oh, yes. The Oasis is out. We have it available for school age kids, ages 7 to 12, teens, 13 to 17, and adults, 18 plus. We are working on the early childhood version. I need a little bit more data before I'm ready to let that go, and a few other projects. It got reprioritized down because I have some other burning projects in my mind. But I hope that next year the Oasis E for early childhood will be out.
Okay, and for those who are not familiar with it, it focuses on the speaker's experience.
Exactly.
But can you give us the full name and tell us what exactly it is?
I'm delighted to. Thank you for asking. So the overall assessment of the speaker's experience of stuttering, or OASIS. And the goal of the OASIS is to measure not how much a person appears to stutter. That's a listener perspective. It's to do this thing that I was talking about instead, focus on the speaker's perspective. How does the speaker perceive their speech? How does the speaker feel about their stuttering and about themselves? How does the speaker perceive their communication with others in key situations? And how does the speaker perceive impact on quality of life? What it gives you is not a severity rating, but rather an impact rating. And this is important because if you work in the schools, you're supposed to qualify kids for therapy based on adverse impact. And this is the only tool that gives you a rating of the impact of stuttering on a person's life. Now, for those that do need a severity measure, because some still do, some districts want severity, I still believe in the speaker's perspective on severity. So Nina and I are working on a new severity measure that I still hope to have out this year. I still hope to have it out this year. I still hope. This is aspirational.
We're early.
Yeah, yeah, it's still
Here.
March. The assessment of multiple perspectives on stuttering severity, or the AMPS. And the AMPS will allow clinicians to get a score of the speaker's severity rating that is scaled, in addition to their own observations, the parents' observations, the teachers' observations, so that we're getting multiple perspectives on severity. So the OASIS does impact, and for those who need it, the AMPS will do severity of the stuckness, the moment of stuttering. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Nina, have you used the OASIS in the schools?
Oh, one thing I'm going to say before I answer that question briefly is that I am, Mary Beth knows that I'm in a hotel room in San Jose because I have to present in San Jose tomorrow. And I've just been getting notes that my paid for internet connection is unstable. So if you lose me, I will bow out and come back. Scott will take the reins and go. But we'll try to keep it moving. The OASIS is quintessential. I can't tell you how passionate I am about this assessment. And in the districts that I've worked with, we had a little saying that, if you had a child on your caseload that you had just assessed or reassessed and there was no OASIS done over the age of 7, it was an incomplete assessment. Go back and do more. Because it basically will write your goals for you, not write your goals for you, but it really gives you a great picture of where the gaps are for kiddos who are experiencing some negative impact with stuttering and what we need to focus on. And it also really helps get us totally away from those very old, outdated, and we need to make sure they're gone. Anybody who says you have to have a certain percentage of stuttered speech to be eligible for therapy, that is actually, I would think, kind of illegal, because it doesn't go with the spirit or the guidelines of IDEA.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But the impact does.
Yes, yes, yes. In other words, when we count stutters, and we still have to do it in certain districts and across certain states, that's fine. Count the stutters if you need to. Every 3 years, I've counted them because I had to, but I never put any stock in the numbers or the severity ratings. It was what I was seeing, what the people were telling me, and what the children were giving me as I dove further into their thoughts and feelings, that really helped me know which kids needed therapy and which didn't.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, again, thank you both for all your work in this field. Let's switch gears to research. So, what pivotal research, in your opinion, has significantly impacted the treatment of and assessment of stuttering?
This is all Scott.
You want to go first in case
your
internet?
Nope.
Nope.
I love that we're doing more assessment into the atypical disfluencies that we're seeing in children, mostly in children with ADHD and autism. There's that third fluency difference that goes like the is, or has some audible inhalations. People are seeing this, but they're misdiagnosing it as either stuttering or cluttering. And there's some good research that's trying to catch up with the clinical anecdotal, those of us in the trenches that have seen it for years. So that's great. But Scott is he is the researcher in this duo.
Well, yeah, I got into the field because I wanted to do research, and I have been very fortunate to be able to not only conduct my own, but to be able to become immersed in it. And we are fortunate. This is as much as people say we don't know this about stuttering, we don't know that about stuttering, it is truly a heavily researched area. We have literally thousands of studies. People have been studying stutter millennia. Literally, there's Egyptian hieroglyphs for stuttering. The very first, what we might call modern scientific studies of stuttering, were done about 100 years ago in the United States. That's about when the field of the study of stuttering started in the US in the 1920s. And it was folks like Lee Edward Travis and Samuel Orton. It was Robert West a little bit later. Charles Van Riper, Wendell Johnson, Dean Williams, so many of those. I have to say forefathers because at the time, 99% of them were male. There's a better balance today. But we've had a lot of study. And indeed, there have been studies that have really shaped our thinking. Some of those are research studies, and some of those are synthesis of research studies. So I'd like to highlight a couple. First of all, one of the most important findings, in my opinion, is that stuttering at its origin is neurological. And this comes from the very first work, the very first paper published in our field demonstrating that stuttering has a neurological origin dates back to 1991. It was a PET scan study showing that there was differences in blood flow in various regions of the brain between people who stutter and people who don't stutter. Now, since then, there have been many, over 100, neuroimaging studies from a variety of different methods that have demonstrated beyond a shadow of a doubt that people who stutter have brains that are different from people who don't stutter. And this is
so fascinating to me that it was just 1991. I mean, that is not that long ago.
Literally yesterday from a science, yes, exactly. It's very recent that we have come to this, this conclusion and then affirmed it, right? However, we should say that Well, we still have people who don't know that stuttering's neurological. So it's been a short time in the one sense, but a long enough time in the other sense. We'd love to be able to say stuttering is not a learned behavior. It's not something that kids just pick up, for example, from other kids. It's not something that they're just doing because they're not trying hard enough or because they're lazy. It's not something that happened because the parents disciplined them incorrectly. This was the belief in the 1950s when my uncle, who stuttered also, was taken to an evaluation with another big name clinician. And the belief at the time was that it was improper parenting. Today, we know it's not those things. They're not major neurological differences. It's not like I could look at the brain and say, oh, well, that's a stutterer's brain, right? There are subtle differences that you can only detect through research. So I don't want everybody recommending an MRI for kids who stutter for clinical purposes. For research purposes, yes, we need as many brains as we can get for that kind of research, right? But for clinical purposes, it's not going to tell you anything. There are subtle differences in how the brain processes language and speech production. And much or most of the time, those differences seem to come from genetic differences. All right. So, in other words, some people are pre-programmed to stutter. This is tremendously important. So we look at the research. We have the 1991 paper that started this. There have been, in particular, the work of Dr. Suan Chung at University of Michigan, previously at Michigan State, showing that these differences are even present in children. So it's not that the person has lived with a lifetime of stuttering and therefore their brain is different. It's that their brain starts out different. They stutter. Then their brain is also different because of living a lifetime of stuttering, right? We have to differentiate both kinds of differences. Tremendously important to know that because it shifts the blame. The blame is not the child's. The blame is not the parents'. The blame is not the environment's. There is no blame. It's just a difference in genes and neurological development. So that's one class of research that I think is tremendously important, the neurological and genetic research. Another class of research that I think is tremendously important, and I'm just going to be a little bit, I'm going to try to be modest on this. This is work that I'm involved in because this is what matters to me, is the person's experience, the individual's experience. Work developing the OASIS. I mentioned Bob Kweasel before. He was my co-author for the OASIS. It's still so sad to talk about Bob. We just lost him, and it was unexpected. But Bob and I developed this by asking people who stutter what stuttering was like for them. And I think that was important. And other people have done it before. We didn't make this up. And other people have done it since. But we're learning more and more about how people experience the moment of stuttering and what it's like for them. What people describe is that it's a moment when they know what they want to say, but they just can't get it out in that moment. They feel, the technical term that people who stutter often use is stuck. They feel stuck. They also use the phrase a loss of control. They've lost control of their speech mechanism, right? This isn't a unique experience for them. It's not something that we non-stutterers have experienced in speech. We've experienced the loss of control in other ways. The most common example being that you're driving along and you hit a patch of ice that you weren't expecting, and you're sliding, you're spinning. If you've ever had the pleasure of doing a 360, that's the kind of experience that people who stutter are having in that moment. It's potentially traumatizing. It's terrifying, right? And so understanding that moment and then recognizing that we can help people learn to navigate those moments successfully so that they can regain control, so that they can move forward in their speech. That to me is critically important. There are other areas. In fact, there is a paper that's just about to come out that is basically those people have NIH funding related to stuttering from NIDCD and other institutes talking about their funded research. And we have a paper coming out in, I can't remember what journal, I'll have to look it up sometime in the next month. But it's key highlighted areas, and it's the neurology and genetics, and it's the motor control issues, and it is down the line the personal experiences of people who stutter. And I think if there's one thing that speech language pathologists can do to improve their treatment of stuttering, It is to get to know people who stutter and hear their stories and hear their experiences and hear their goals and their dreams and their frustrations. And it's a humbling experience to hear what adults who stutter think about their school-based, school-aged therapy, because the clinician was doing the best she could, but she just didn't know. She didn't know that it was okay to talk to the kid about how he feels. She thought she was supposed to be counting and marking and saying, do this and do that. But if they can learn that it's okay to say, how you doing today? Yeah, you had that difficult situation in class. Not you stuttered in class, but you were feeling bad about not reading the other day. Let's work on making it easier for you to face that fear so that you can read like the others do when you want to. Or, you're not sure what people are going to say about your speech. Let's work on knowing how to respond when people talk about your speech. You're not even sure what to call your stuttering. Let's work on that. And these are the kinds of activities that can make a tremendous difference. Now, I see some great questions coming in on the chat that this is Nina's wheelhouse. So
Yes,
I can keep
so
answering,
Nina,
but I
can
want to
you
leave some
repeat
time.
that? So people are asking about the atypical disfluencies and the audible inhalations, and if they're not stuttering, what are they classified as?
Well, and Scott, I told you before we got started recording, Mary Beth, he'll talk and answer a question in the chat at the same time. I don't know how he does it, but there is a lot of clinicians asking those same exact questions. So I'm glad they brought them up. And even though we had more to cover, this is a good place to just sort of stop and say, listen, this is that. And I keep talking to Scott. I said, we should just decide it's the third fluency difference and just say, this is different. You can stutter and flutter. You can, stutter and have atypical disfluencies, which is the current terminology. We're trying to find a better term for that. We're working on it, because atypical disfluencies is, some people say that stuttering is atypical disfluencies. Unless you're a person who stutters, it's not atypical for you to have stuttering. It's natural for you to have stuttering in your speech. But I think that the atypicals of mid-word breaks, audible inhalations, final consonant repetitions are being studied and seen in children with autism and ADHD mostly, although it's not unheard of that somebody else, without those other diagnoses can demonstrate this type of speech difference. But Scott put up a couple of blogs that will get you started, and there are resources and links on those blogs, and you'll know some of the names in this area. Vivian Siskin, Kathy Scaler Scott, lots of people in our profession are really trying to get a bigger hold on not only what's going on, but how we help.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that. And then we'll make sure that we have those links for those blogs as included in the course for future people. So we can share those as well. Okay, so thank you for sharing the research, the pivotal research in your opinion. And you've kind of mentioned it before, but what further research would you like to see developed to advance the treatment of stuttering?
I think Scott's probably got 32,000 answers to this, and that's hyperbole, but stay with me. Mine, I want more help with those kiddos that we're talking about, because every clinician has a question about the atypical disfluencies, and they don't want them, they don't know what to do with them or whether they should be doing anything with them. Is this a listener issue? Is this a person's issue? I want more research and more clinical advice and help and ideas in that area. But for me, the research letting us know that the work that we do with children who stutter that steers away from trying to get them to mask their speech, to shove down their stuttering so that, sometimes they'll feel better about it and listeners will feel better about it. But many times the person inside is going, that's really hard to do all of that stuff. And even though you didn't see me stutter, I can't keep all of this up. This is draining me, and killing me, trying to focus on how I'm talking. I just want to talk. And so I want to see research that proves and helps us understand in what way does the shift away from that fluency focus help support people who stutter. Because people who stutter will tell us that was really traumatizing for them. They didn't know it at the time. They said they wanted fluency, but all of those years of working on fluency and never really getting it because it's a neurologically based speech difference and feeling like a failure can be traumatizing. So that's my area.
Thank you.
And not surprisingly, I agree. I would love to see research done from a slightly different perspective than it's been done so far. Some of the same studies, but done from a different perspective. The presumption has always been that stuttered speech is disordered speech by definition. And what we're hoping to do is guide people toward looking at stuttered speech as a different way, a variation, one of the many expressions of human speech. Nina captured this idea by coining the phrase verbal diversity for describing stuttering back in 2019. And it's caused some interest and some apprehension for people who don't know what it means. Well, if stuttering is diversity, does that mean we work on it or not? And the answer is yes, we can for the right people at the right time in the right way. But I would love to see some of the research, for example, the motor control research, the neurology research, done from a perspective of not this is necessarily disordered, inherently bad or wrong, but a variation, because that opens up a huge range of ways that we can look at stuttering. So there is research to be done. I'd like to shift the focus a little bit.
Okay, thank you. And we, of course, are running short on time. So we've kind of already talked about some of the biggest changes we've seen during your career. Is there anything else that you wanted to add there?
I think I would like to make a little commercial for any SLP who's sitting there thinking, okay, I want to be a stutter affirming therapist, or I'm a new clinician, or I'm a student clinician. What do I really need to do, to make sure that I'm, getting on the right foot, knowing that I do have a role in this. It's not, okay, stuttering's a difference, so you go stutter and good luck with that. No, at all, not. And so, but one of the things that is going to shift is it's not going to be tools, right? It's not the time spent in therapy is not going to be taken over by strategies, skills, technique, how you talk, practice this. So what's it going to need? Time with counseling, okay, in communication disorders, okay? And so if you want a piece of advice on where to start, I would really start to delve into how do we get at and help our students navigate not just their stutter, but their thoughts and feelings about being a person who stutters in a world that doesn't get it. And that's our role. It's in our scope of practice, but it's not something that people have been trained on a lot or feel comfortable with. And I think those are the places to go to get more information.
And as you said, in a world that doesn't get it, what can we do as SLPs to help change the world, to help get the world get it?
Scott, I was pointing to you.
Help people understand what stuttering truly is. It's not just a speech disorder. It's not that there's something wrong. It's a different way of speaking where we can intentionally create a world that's accepting and understanding of this variation. And then we can help people see that the goal of talking, and we all know this, but we sometimes forget it. The goal of talking is to communicate. When people open their mouths to talk, they don't do it in order to be fluent. They do it in order to communicate their message. And if we can keep our focus and keep other people's focus on communication as the purpose of talking, well, then that takes an awful lot of the burden off. We don't have to fix kids who stutter. A, they're not broken, but it takes the burden off from them trying to do something that is not natural for them. Natural speech for a person who stutters is stuttered speech. When they're doing
So
any
true.
kind of speaking skill, it's not natural for them. So it takes added effort. It doesn't feel like them. It doesn't sound like them. And that increases the burden on their communication.
Mhm.
So this is a big part of the message that we can all put out there to reduce the stigma within our field and within the world as a whole.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And we covered a lot of ground. I know we're just right up about on time. I had asked you to bring in a case study of one of the most memorable success stories. In 1 minute or less, is there one that you want to share?
Scott, you're unmuted. You should go first.
I'm unmuted still? Okay. I was just
Okay.
pasting another blog. There's some great questions that are coming in on the chat. I've answered those I can, but I can't get them all because I can't talk and type at the same time. But I've gotten a few. Yeah, yeah. I tell you what, I've had people come in to therapy when you can tell just by looking at them that they don't value themselves. The way they hold themselves, the way they carry themselves, the way they dress, their personal hygiene, even the glasses they wear, the clothes they wear, they don't value themselves. And it's understandable because they've lived in a society that doesn't value an aspect of them, a rather central aspect if you're a human being. Talking is central.
Mhm.
And those stigmatizing messages, they hurt. And they start in the early days. But as they learn to value themselves and as they learn to value what they say and how they say it and who they are and how they are, it opens up a whole new world for them. And I was trying to think of a particular case example. There's one, I don't want to give away anything, that would identify somebody, but there is a person that I worked with years ago who had a certain career, a helping career, as their goal in life, and didn't think they'd be able to reach that goal by coming to terms with the fact that they stuttered and that they were going to stutter and that it was okay to stutter and that stuttering didn't have to hold them back from going into that helping profession. They ultimately did that and went on to have a very successful career as the stuttering blank, the profession that the person is in. I'll pick physical therapist. The person's not a physical therapist, but the stuttering physical therapist, and everybody knew. And a few years later, Nina actually ran into that individual as in a professional setting. And do you know Yaruss? He was my therapist years ago. I was like, you don't know the guy, never heard of him. Yeah. But
That's
these kinds
great.
of success
Yeah.
stories, they're common. This is not to diminish the real pain that many people who stutter experience, but we also don't want to take a view that it's hopeless for people who stutter because it's absolutely 100% not.
Thank you for sharing. Nina, is there one that you wanted to highlight or?
Well, I think it's, of course, there's always a few that stick in your mind, but um, one adolescent who came as an early adolescent and said, I need this to go away. I need to be fluent. I need to, kick this out because I'm not going to be able to do what I want to do with my life, right? And I need it gone. And just by, um, you know, finding out from this young person, what is it that you think fluency is going to get you? What's fluency going to get you? Then those were the actual best hopes, the goals for that student. The communication that they valued is what they thought fluency was going to get them. And over a period of years in therapy, not really working a lot on this, but working on this and this, that student is well aware that um, they can do all of that communication with stuttering. You do not have to be fluent to be successful. Debunk the myth and help these students. Now, they're not going to believe you right away. You're planting some seeds. It's not like you're going to go, hey, it's okay to stutter. And they're going to go, oh, good. I'm better now. It's you plant the seed. You say it's okay to stutter, and then you show it's okay to stutter. It's not okay to stutter, but make that one smooth. It's not okay to stutter, but try that one again and use your tools. These are messages that we've got to stop doing to kids and people who stutter. It is okay to stutter, all of it, every day. And as people who stutter approach their stuttering with less fear and intensity, then the stutter isn't as struggled and scary, and they're not switching their words. They're communicating spontaneously with their stutter, which is 100% better. I always say one confident stutter is better than 5, fluency tools. It's so important to just say what you want to say when you want to say it.
So true. So true. Oh, I wish this were an hour and a half. So one last question. When you reflect on your career, is there anything that you would change? Because sometimes these things help people who are, just starting out in their careers. Anything that you want to share?
I don't really have something I'd like to change. Well, I wouldn't get involved with this guy, number one, because we're dangerous together. We will not sleep. We will not eat. We will just work ourselves into early, I don't know what, and it won't be good. So we're working together as friends and colleagues to make a better balance. But what we do is it's so important to us. We're trying to find a way to say too much of a good thing is not a good thing, but we haven't learned it yet, I don't think.
Well, let us know when you do, right? All right, we have so many positive comments in the chat here. How about you, Scott? Anything that you would change?
Yeah, I'm afraid that I would say something very similar. I would have started with, we talked about hobbies. I would have started with that earlier. I'm trying to teach my current doctoral students not to have the work intensive period of your life and then the learn to transition to something better part, easier part of your life, and then maybe retirement, but to find that balance along the way. I'm a terrible, terrible role model for them. I have this funny thing where I tell my students, anytime you get a paper accepted for publication, because that's the metric of our success in the academy, right? I've published almost 140 peer-reviewed papers. Every time I get a peer-reviewed paper accepted, I take the night off, and I always tell my students this. Well, one of my current doctoral students, I've been saying this for 20 years. One of my current doctoral students completely stopped me in my tracks last year, when she said, "Are those the only nights you take off?" And I was like, oh no, I got to rethink this. Now, it is a constant challenge. And if I go into any more detail, you're going to have to send me a bill for this therapy session. But it's a constant challenge to try to find that balance. And it's tough because there are, frankly, more things that we want to do than we have time to do. I run an NIH grant and an NSF grant in my day job. I have a lab with 20 people in it. Yet, I want to be working on our books. I want to be working on the amps and on the Oasis E and all those fun things. And so we do our best to find that balance. But what that does mean is sometimes I can't respond, when people, like I got an email from a colleague this morning, he translated the Oasis into Greek. It's translated into more than 30 languages. He wants to know, when's it going to be published? I don't know, I'm too busy. So I do feel bad about that because I overpromise. You're supposed to underpromise and overdeliver,
Yes.
but then I overpromise and overdeliver, and it's, kind of a human thing.
A human thing, and challenge of a busy person who's very dedicated and has you both have contributed so much to our field. And if that's the biggest problem that comes with it, well, that's okay.
I would have said sorry to my wife more often. Maybe I.
Well, and you know what, you mentioned quite a few times in this, and I didn't know exactly when to acknowledge, but I did want to acknowledge the loss of your friend and colleague, part of your work family, Bob Queasel. So
Thank you. Yeah.
we do. Let's think of a maybe dedicating this to him.
Very thoughtful. Thank you.
All right. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we say goodbye? Yumi's going to be, she's going to be chatting. We need to end. There we go. Okay. Anything else?
Just get involved in the stuttering community. It's where I met Scott. It's where I met my husband. That's not why you get involved in the stuttering community, but it's the passionate place for you to learn from people who are actually people who stutter, instead of learning out of a book or learning from an Instagram. Get involved in any way, shape, or form, and make certain that you are recommending that the parents, teachers, caregivers, and children and people that you work with get involved in that way as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that advice. Okay. Thank you, Nina and Scott. We truly appreciate your time reflecting on your careers, the treatment of stuttering, and the field of speech language pathology. As a reminder, if you are joining us for the live course and your state license requires live CEUs, be sure to complete all course modules, including the one that says complete course, before the end of the day today on your SpeechTherapyPD account. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for hanging in with us and participating. And we can't wait to see you for episode 2.
Thanks so much for this opportunity. And thanks to folks on the chat for the very kind words. Reach out to us anytime. I put our email address there in the chat. We're happy to help however we can. We answer questions from clinicians truly all over the world every single day.
From 12 to 2 in the morning.
When else are you going to do it?
Well, get some sleep.
I get up at 3:30 to speak to a group in Denmark. So yes, I am going to go sleep quickly now.
Yes, that's what Nina said. So, wow. Thank you for all you do for so many people. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks for this.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for today's live course. In order to receive live credit, you must complete the full course, including the quiz and survey, the same day as the live presentation. Now that you've enjoyed the presentation, please go back to your dashboard when logged into your account and scroll down to find your enrolled courses. Once you locate your course, click on the course box to open the course content. Once you open the course box, the webinar information will appear.
Hello.
Simply click OK to move on to complete the course.
I know they will.
Please keep in mind that you must access all modules in order from top to bottom as noted in all course instructions. Start with the course instructions and work your way down. You must access any provided handouts in order. Simply click the red box to download the handout to your device. The handout will then be located in your download section of the device you are using. Once you have accessed any provided handouts, you can then go on to the quiz. Keep in mind that a quiz may be 2 simple questions for you to answer or verify attendance. If the quiz is this type, click inside the gray box to input your answer and then follow the steps to proceed until the quiz is completed. Once you have completed the quiz, you may then go on to the survey. Complete the full survey and then you will receive your certificate of completion. Please note that if you wish for your completed course to be sent to ASHA, you must have selected yes for the ASHA registry and also entered in your full ASHA number within your account at the time of course completion. Then please allow 1 to 2 months to show on your ASHA registry. Thanks again for joining us for today's live course. Thank you for joining us for today's live course. In order to receive live credit, you must complete the full course, including the quiz and survey, the same day as the live presentation. Now that you've enjoyed the presentation, please go back to your dashboard when logged into your account and scroll down to find your enrolled courses. Once you locate your course, click on the course box to open the course content. Once you open the course box, the webinar information will appear. Simply click OK to move on to complete the course. Please keep in mind that you must access all modules in order from top to bottom as noted in all course instructions. Start with the course instructions and work your way down. You must access any provided handouts in order. Simply click the red box to download the handout to your device. The handout will then be located in your download section of the device you are using. Once you have accessed any provided handouts, you can then go on to the quiz. Keep in mind that a quiz may be 2 simple questions for you to answer or verify attendance. If the quiz is this type, click inside the gray box to input your answer and then follow the steps to proceed until the quiz is completed. Once you have completed the quiz, you may then go on to the survey. Complete the full survey and then you will receive your certificate of completion. Please note that if you wish for your completed course to be sent to ASHA, you must have selected yes for the ASHA registry and also entered in your full ASHA number within your account at the time of course completion. Then please allow 1 to 2 months to show on your ASHA registry. Thanks again for joining us for today's live course.